Hello, my name is Monica Sadiq, and this is my TED Talk. Hi, how is everyone doing? How's everyone's spring semester going? It's going to be our fourth year as juniors as we're heading into the fall semester, into our senior year here at Clark Atlanta University. It's quite amazing that we have already reached the end of this experience. I'm so excited to see what fall has to bring, but of course, it's really surreal to think that this is our first full year here at Clark Atlanta University, enjoying both semesters while here. Prior to junior year, 2 years ago, we got into a pandemic around March of freshman year for those that are in class of 2023 or transfers. And it's been a roller coaster of 2 years, getting allocated to this new normal. It's crazy to think of where we were 2 years ago. COVID-19, of course, we cannot just make light of it. There were some atrocious downs and sad hardships that were experienced in those 2 years. Homes were lost, families and friends and loved ones had to grieve, and a lot of transitional periods happened, and growing pains had to be dealt with through those 2 years. For some people, those 2 years could have either been the worst times that they've experienced or some of the best. For me, it was the most transformative. COVID-19 was a blurb, a ripple in time. In retrospect, the pandemic served as a transition for us out of what we deemed as normal at the time in an ever-evolving world. Of course, since the beginning of this 21st century, in the last 20 years, there's been so many impactful events that we've encountered and witnessed, and seen how things have developed. We have grown technologically, socially, and globally within these 20 years of time. We became so codependent on these new technologies that have, if not exacerbated or reached new heights during these last 2 years. Using Zoom to have conversations or interviews, or even Postmates for food, and DoorDash for these casual conveniences that we now are becoming more used to and sensitized to. During this time, the only thing that stopped was us. We had to understand and get used to the woes and flows of this new life. Those that did were able to adapt and move forth with this ever-changing world, and those that didn't were stuck behind. This pandemic unveiled a lot of ugly, but with those ugly truths, we were set forth on another beautiful journey. That journey to self was the biggest takeaway of this time so far. In our everyday world prior to the pandemic, we focused on everything but the now. Our obligations, responsibilities, beliefs we imposed on ourselves to keep the world, to keep up with the world. That only fogged the mirrors that we didn't face in our realities at the time. The pandemic allowed time to stop, the veil to be removed from our sights, and we sit still in our own reference, insecurities, fears, and doubts. All that we've been running away from in this time. That weight so many blindlessly carried on their back began to wear down on them. A lot of family homes had to bear the burden, having to have that responsibility back, have those things that normally would be subsided. A lot of development occurred over those 2 years. I personally transitioned into a young adult, one with responsibility, one who hasn't had expectations around me, and where it was my time to create the opportunity for myself and not only reclaim my time, but reclaim my story in life. Some were just leaping into their new lives. Of course, we had graduations, retirement, weddings, big pinnacles of life that just kind of had to be halted and stopped to really take that time in solitude to pick up a couple skills and learn yourselves. I personally picked up a couple skills and some hobbies. I enjoy to paint. I love cooking. I love a good dance. And lastly, I love to garden. Now, before I get into anything, I love gardening. I love the environment. It's pretty well, but I don't mean literal plants in this go around. Even though I'm not 100% invested yet, I hope to, be able to give back to Mother Nature as she gives back to us. But the garden that I learned to tend to was one of the mental. Like I had mentioned earlier, in this transitional time, it was definitely a journey of self that was a lesson to be learned. But much like any garden, any plant or seed you plan to grow, there's an environment that it first must be bred in. First, you got to lay down the groundwork. For once in finding myself in my identity, I wanted to hold the traits I needed, learn boundaries to set myself on, but I understood I could not build a foundation on shaky ground. If I'm consumed with distractions, self-doubt, unworthiness, all these negative things that I was letting affect my mental psyche, and these agreements or belief systems that I had grown up throughout my youth and my experiences, I'd be doing more harm than good by starting anew or planting seeds if the soil that it was on was infertile or toxic, as our generation likes to say. To my garden, I also had to address that there were weeds in my garden. I had to rid them as soon as possible. I had to face the funk. I had to embrace the negativity, the draining source that enabled my ability to love completely and wholeheartedly from the inside out. Once my soil was fertile, I was able to lay down and get rid of those weeds that were going to poison my seeds and the plants and trees that I had planned to grow. I realized my garden as well had pesticides, bugs, all of that, and it was just a no-go. I like that when I was trying to find a new path or go the road less traveled, if you will, those that weren't understanding or familiar with that started to lose faith in me or the person that they once knew. Like I said earlier, in the pandemic, it taught us to adapt, evolve, and better ourselves for the world. If you couldn't, you eroded, you became debris, another weed or pesticide on my apple tree that I'm trying to grow. So I had to be okay and comfortable and understand that in order for me to gain my independence, I'd have to lose the support from those that weren't good for my garden anymore. And I had to understand that what I had in plan and in store for myself, the plants, the harvest that I was ready to reap was solely for me. The last thing I had to learn while I was tending to my garden is to find comfort in certainty and give grace to that process of growing those seeds I have planted. Although I had picked the weeds out of the garden, I laid down new soil, I worked hard to watch those seeds I had planted start to grow. However, they grew slowly. I grew impatient. I grew annoyed, became belligerent, and overall, I was not tending to my garden as well as I thought because I still spewed negativity on my plants. When I was going through this time, a friend told me, when you're planting something such as a tree or a flower or even fruits or whatnot, you're not going to keep looking at that soil and not wishing well on those plants, wishing that they're growing, hoping and seeing that although it's underground and it's not known yet, you have to have that faith that whatever you've planted and you're working towards will always bloom and find a way to show out, you know. I learned I was punishing myself for what I did not know, and have had done more harm than good to plant my seeds, to tend to my garden. I learned having high expectations for yourself is important. It means you want more. It means that you see bigger and better for yourself. But as long as I was doing the consistent work and effort, giving grace, that all will unfold as it should. I had to find comfort in that uncertainty. Let that seed grow and trust the process in the end. Thank you.